G'day viewers, my name's Graeme Stevenson and I'd like to invite you to come on a journey of creativity and learning and adventure through the series Colour in Your Life. There's an artist in every family throughout the world, and lots of times there's an artist deep down inside all of us as well. So grab your kids, your brothers, your sisters, your aunties, uncles and mums and dads and come and see how some of the best artists in Australia do what they do.
We're in the beautiful city of Sydney this show to see an amazing artist, so come along and enjoy the incredible talent that Sydney has to offer.
G'day, Graeme.
G'day, Rae. How are you, darling? Good to see you too.
Come on in.
Can I come in and see what you're up to?
Yep, come on in and have a cup of tea.
Thank you, darling. That's great. Well, g'day viewers and welcome back to Colour in Your Life. We're going to have an amazing day today. As you know, we're actually seeking many artistic people as we go through our journey across Australia to bring you these series. And I'm with a lady at the moment called Rae Woolnough. How are you, Rae?
I'm good, thanks, Graeme.
Thank you so much for having us in your
all right.
studio. This is going to be great. But Rae works with, and funnily enough, she works with wool and fibres and silks and alpaca, some amazing stuff to actually make artwork. I think what you do is absolutely fascinating.
Thank you.
This is going to be an amazing show. But one of your influences, and I remember as a kid, well, it wasn't that too long ago, it was a $2 note, and it was a gentleman called John MacArthur and his wife Elizabeth, and they were an influence on you, weren't they?
They were, yes. Many years ago, my parents used to take tours over what was Elizabeth Farm before it was taken over by the National Trust. As part of learning about the farm, they were actually presented photocopies of John and Elizabeth MacArthur's letters.
Yeah.
A challenge was to sit there and read these letters, and they started to talk about the sheep and the breeding, and as you know, John and Elizabeth MacArthur were very instrumental in the merino breeding in Australia. And so I guess I probably got a bit of a romantic attachment, being a dreamy 13-year-old, reading about, you know, the wool industry and dreaming of ships and sheep and whatnot. But really, it came back to me about 10 or 12 years ago when my daughter actually reintroduced me to felt.
Yeah.
She came home one day in June and says, I have to do felting. And I was like, oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
And she started to show me the process and I just fell in love with it.
And it's just fascinating the way you do it. But what you're going to do with us today, and it really is, when you look at Rae's work, it is an art form. I mean, you frame, you mat these things at the end of it, but they literally are like three-dimensional paintings. It's the only way I can describe it, but created with fibres and wool. And the wool itself, I mean, to feel some of the fibres in this wool, it's like a feather, isn't it?
It is almost like working with clouds.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
But you're going to take us through the whole process today of the dyeing for a start, and this is really going to be very interesting. And you use a microwave, so can you tell us how you go about all this?
I do, yes. Now the reason I use a microwave with my dyes is I actually think it's a little bit more environmentally friendly. You don't end up with a great deal of residual dye, which you then have to get rid of either by pouring it down the sink or putting it in your garden. These are actually protein dyes, and protein dyes actually work with protein fibres, so they are things like silk and wool, and it works really well on your hands as well, so I have to put on gloves when I'm using it, but it won't work on synthetics and it doesn't like cotton, so it's an interesting sort of dye. What isn't particularly environmentally friendly is that I actually use Glad Wrap to wrap up the dye and put it in the microwave. And the reason I also use this process too, unlike a dye bath where you put the whole piece of fabric in a large amount of dye, you only get the one colour. I actually want to create interesting degrees of colour in my dyeing, and I like to have almost a random look to my dye. So that's another reason why I use the microwave, because the dye tends not to bleed into itself.
Let's see how this goes
So
about.
let's have a look. So put out the glad wrap, which is basically just to contain it.
Yeah.
One more should do it.
Look at that, I'm helping.
It's good. Okay, the first thing I do is actually wet the silk.
That's just water?
Just water. The reason I wet the silk is it helps the dye disperse more evenly when I need it to.
Okay.
And you don't want any dry patches in your silk at all when you're putting it in the microwave. Because silk can burn when it's heated too much.
Okay.
Now, I was thinking with this particular artwork, I actually had a beautiful necklace that I purchased a little while ago, and I love the colours, so I thought I'd do a design based on these beautiful colours and try and get that same look of the textures and the beautiful gem colours that are in that.
Okay.
So the dyes that I've got here are greens.
Greens and blues.
Greens and blues and a few browns.
And is it toxic enough to wear
Not
gloves?
really. This is just so that when I touch the dyes, I don't end up with purple hands for the day, because it does soak into your skin pretty quickly. So I think I might get a little bit of green here.
Yeah.
And really, I'm just going to pour the dyes on here, just in little spots.
Okay. And that's the only, it's just water that you put in with them?
Just water,
Okay.
yep. And I'm actually going to massage that in a little bit to create colours that I want. I want to get a little bit sort of a random look.
Yeah.
Now I think a nice blue would be good. And that's a better colour, I like that.
All right, so you're going to use some, is it crystal or natural form
Yes,
of it?
it's an actual powder. This is the actual dye before we've actually turned it into a liquid, just added water. All I'm going to do is just sprinkle a little bit of that in powder form on here, and the moisture that's actually in here already will create some interesting speckles.
It's amazing that what you're really doing is, this is your canvas.
It is, yes. This is my starting block, I suppose. So now all I'm going to do is wrap this up.
Yep.
So that when I nuke it in the microwave, it doesn't splatter all over the inside of the microwave.
Sure.
And I'll put that in a microwave-proof container.
Okay.
And into the microwave. Here we go.
It's done.
It's done. Doesn't look terribly appetising, does it?
I'm going to need a sauce on mine, I can tell you now.
Okay.
Right, so what happens now?
I'll let that cool now, down very, very slowly.
Yeah.
As I said, it's the heat allowing it, when it goes through the cooling process, is what makes the dye more permanent.
Okay.
And when we open that up later, there'll be virtually no residual dye left behind.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? So, all right, so where do we go from that? Obviously, we'll let that one cool, but there's probably a spot where you've got another one set up, is there?
Yes, definitely.
All right, Rae, well, this is the finished product. You've actually dyed it and then you've rinsed it, and now we've actually dried it. You can see how it's come out so beautifully, and these little flecks that are in there. I mean, that's all the gold fleck.
Yep.
But now you've actually started to lay out this magnificent wool underneath. So explain to me what we do next.
Okay, now this is the actual felt base. It's made out of roving, what they call roving, which is the wool. So this is my palette. Basically, any artist has a palette of colours. I have all these different colours wools, and I'll quite often blend those. What I've done here is I've actually started to lay out the fleece. You can see I've actually got it on a nylon-y material. That's quite important as part of the process, because being completely synthetic, these fibres, when we start the felting process, won't migrate through that particular fabric, and I can actually release this. But it will migrate through the silk. And so what I lay on the base will actually come through the silk that actually come through the silk. So I need to sort of decide where I'm going to place my colours as I go through, matching up with the silk on the other side.
Okay.
Particularly with the Shibori technique that I'm going to demonstrate, the colours on the bottom actually end up on the top in some areas. So we're looking at almost a sandwich of 2 layers of felt with silk in between and creating interesting textures and tones.
But you called it a shibori.
Shibori.
Okay.
Shibori is actually a Japanese word.
I was going to say
We used to
Japanese.
call it tie dyeing.
Okay.
But this is actually tie felting instead. Okay,
All right.
so I'll just show you the rest of, we'll put the silk aside for now,
Okay.
and I'll continue to lay out these fibres. And it's just a matter of pulling it out and letting it drift down to where I want to place it. And we're so lucky in Australia, we've got access to, you know, the best quality merino fleeces, and we tend to take it for granted.
Yeah.
You know, we just don't realise how lucky we are that Australia did basically, you know, develop on the back of the sheep, they used to say. So, it's really lovely to be able to work with a product that's
magnificent.
Australian. And,
Yeah, I mean, I know that the viewers can't see it out there, but it really is so amazingly soft. It's just beautiful, and the fibre itself, it's so fine. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
okay, so that's my bed of fibre,
Okay.
and now I'm going to put the silk over the top of that.
Yep.
Now this one I'm using a whole piece of silk. Sometimes I don't use a whole piece of silk. Sometimes I'll lay out the based fleece and then I'll just put parts of silk over it. Particularly when I'm doing some of my landscapes, I tend to just use parts of silk and other fibres. I'll use the hemp and the camel, Corriedale, mohair, and make some really interesting textures on that. And I'll do that a little bit later in this process as well.
Cool.
But I'm going to wet this down now.
Okay.
And,
This is the giant,
this is the giant wetter downer machine thing.
and it's pressurised.
It's pressurised. So what I'm going to put in here is warm water.
Okay.
And I'm also going to put in a bit of soap. It's pretty horrific looking stuff.
Oh God!
And then I'm going to just spray it, wet it down, and then I can start the felting process. So
Okay.
we'll get going with that. So now we're just going to wet the fibres down.
Yeah.
Make it a little bit gentler than that.
It's all those little tricks that you learn as you go along. People sort of say, "How long did you do this?" And the bottom line is, it's over a decade now, isn't it?
It is, and I've been and learnt from lots of other people. I've been really fortunate to have done workshops with people, international felters from Lithuania and overseas, and it's a constant learning process.
Yeah.
Every time you go to a workshop, you think you know everything,
Yep.
and you know you don't. And then you find a new and another technique or another way to do felting or another process that makes the whole job a little bit easier.
Sure.
So let's
So
just keep wetting.
that's a good point you just made. Remember, guys, workshops, you'll learn a lot.
Professional development, we
Yes.
call it. Now I'm going to cover it with another piece of the same type of material,
Yeah.
and I'm going to roll it up and actually start the felting process.
Okay.
This is a bamboo mat. Some people like to use bubble wrap. You can use virtually anything that's got a texture. So all we're going to do is, is to roll this up. Now I'm going to roll this way and that will make it felt in that direction, and then after about 100 or 200 rolls I'll turn it around and I'll felt it in the opposite direction so it will shrink in both directions.
Okay.
So I'm just going to roll this up and I'm going to put a towel down underneath just to collect the moisture so it doesn't
Sure.
run all over the floor.
There's a plethora of materials and wool everywhere in your studio.
Yes.
I can do that for you.
Okay. Now, to make that stay, I'm just going to put a couple of rubber bands around it or tie it up just to make it a little bit easier because it will unroll.
So just an old stocking or some
An old
elastic bands.
stocking or a rubber band's good too. Now what's good about the rush mat too is that this will get cold, and if I wanted to then warm it up, I can run over to, you know, the kitchen sink or whatever and pour a bit more of the warm water on it. All right, I've had enough, it's your turn.
Do you want me to have a go?
Yes, you have a go, just nice long rolls like that, and you are felting.
This is a first.
This is the first for you, Graeme.
This is unbelievable. Now, the Mongolians do this, don't they?
That's correct. Now, the Mongolians are probably one of the original makers of felt. They use it for their yurts.
Yeah.
They actually cut the fleece manually off their sheep.
Yeah.
They then beat it with big wooden sticks, and that actually clears it of dirt and to a point chops the wool up. And they'll quite often put it on what they call a mother piece of felt,
Yeah.
which is a piece that already exists. And they'll roll it up like this with wet skins. They don't use any soap, they just use water. And then they drag it behind their horses.
Is that right?
Yep, from one place to the next, they drag it behind their horses.
I think that's coming out.
That's fine.
Is it all right? Okay.
And that makes the felt.
It's just amazing. It's absolutely fascinating. Right, to 99, 300. Well done.
Okay, and then I'll just turn it around and we'll go in the other direction.
Okay.
And the way you test your felt is to make sure that it is felted, is when we unroll it, we can test it. And if the fibres are still lifting off and it's still slippery, then it's not felted enough and you have to keep felting. So you can see it's beginning to stick there, you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
So it's still a little bit slippery, so I'll keep on felting and I'll turn it around in the other direction and felt it in the other direction for a while. I'll make a felter out of you
I
yet.
tell you what, I'll end up at those felting meetings from now on.
The felting convergence. Okay, now I've actually got another piece of felt that I've already completed this process, so we might move to that.
Sure.
And I'll show you the next part of the Shibori part of felting.
But I was having a good time. All right, let's go the other one.
Okay, let's have a look.
Well, as you can see, it just feels fabulous, all of these fibres through the rubbing process have matted together. I mean, this is real feel. This is what the Mongolians do to...
That's what the Mongolians did.
Yeah.
But we've added silk and we've added colour.
Yeah.
And this is the other side. You can see what's happened is the fibres have actually migrated through the silk and they've started to shrink. And by doing that, they've pulled the silk in and created this lovely ruching effect.
And it's really made a blanket. It's made
it has, a lovely silk blanket.
Yeah. But in saying that, you've turned this into an art form and you've started to put, is it buttons underneath it?
It is, it's buttons. Now this is the Shibori technique.
Yeah.
All I'm doing is tying buttons in and I stand back and look at the design and the colour and sort of imagine where I'd like to place all these little clusters.
Yes.
And I tie them through here and then I'll start to put other embellishments. So I'll be putting other pieces of silk on there.
Yes.
I'll be putting other little bits of what they call silk throaster, which is basically a waste product, but it's beautiful. I'll also be putting more fleece over the top and then going through the whole felting process again and shrinking it down and creating a lovely texture, and then I'll show you the last process.
So you actually take these buttons out later on?
I do.
You
yes,
do? Okay.
Yes, I take them out. And all I do is I simply just get a button, and as I said, I'm looking at the design and deciding where I'm going to put the next little floralette that I'm creating, and then all I'm going to do is actually tie that in. So it's an old form of tie-dyeing that we used to do way back in the 1970s. I think we used to do rainbow shirts and all sorts of things. And I'm going to tie them in. And I use different sizes to create interesting clusters and different looks.
All right, Rae, well you've sort of tied all of your buttons into place, which is amazing. I've got an inkling of what she's going to do with these now, which is pretty cool. But you're going to actually put a lot more fibre down on this.
That's right. The next stage of the process is to actually now start to put in some more interesting textures. I'll probably add in some more silk, maybe just some plain coloured silk. I'll probably put more fleece over the top because this is all a very textured finish. I'd probably like to have some smoother areas to create some quiet spaces, and then I'll also put in what's called some silk throaster, which is basically a waste product, which is lovely sort of mats of silk fibre, and then felt it again. So as I said, again, working back to that idea of sort of something like an opal or a gemstone, I'm trying to create all those different depths of colours with the different fibres.
How much generally would a piece like this sell for?
Oh look, I tend to sell my works around about the $700-800 mark, but I'm more than anything, it's just really satisfying to get that feedback from people when you have an exhibition or you have them on display and they come up to it and they go, it's felt, and you see their eyes light up as if they've never seen anything like it before.
This is quite fascinating. They look like little mushrooms or little lichen of some sort, but
exactly.
This is where the buttons come into play.
That's right,
So
this is right. So yes, we finished and just dried it out, and now I'm just going to go back and remember how I tied it up with a synthetic thread?
Yeah.
I very carefully cut that synthetic thread away so I don't cut the silk.
Okay.
And then I cut out the actual button to create that little floralette. So I'll just pull that out. And I trim this off to create that lovely little flower.
And it just stays there like that. It
does.
Doesn't. All right, an amazing finished work here, and it really is art by any means. It's just a magnificent piece of work. I think it's just an incredible process that we've been through here today. I've learned just so much. I think it's amazing. But just to finish this off, as a piece of artwork, you would normally have this in a mat and a frame.
That's right, yes. So I'd have it mounted by my framer. I always put my artworks in what's called a box frame.
Yeah.
For two reasons. One, there's still quite a lot of natural oils in wool and fleece, so you need to have some air movement and some breathing space. And also the very fact that it's so textured, I don't want it squashed behind glass. I want to be able to see those textures. So by putting it in a box frame, you can actually see the textures are revealed.
Well, let's put that in there and we'll go from there. Well viewers, as you can see, another amazing day, an incredible piece of artwork created, and I have learnt so much today myself. Rae, I would like to thank you so much for having us in here.
You're welcome.
It was absolutely incredible to see this process come together, and Rae is one of the few people in the country, she's been overseas to learn how to do this. You also conduct workshops, don't you?
That's correct, yes. I'm fortunate that I'm able to run workshops from the Virginia Wool Farm at Annengrove, and so if you're interested in having classes, certainly contact them or contact me through my website and we can organise that.
Amazing, amazing day. Also, great importance as well, obviously with the workshops, you can learn so much. The Colour in Your Life team is putting on a number of workshops next year ourselves, so make sure you get in touch with us at colorinyourlife.com.au. As always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, all the people that support us. We have some amazing things coming up in the next 12 months. I mean, some announcements that we're going to keep to ourselves for the time being, but some really, really exciting stuff. But Rae, once again, I'd really like to thank you for having us come along.
Thank you.
It's been incredible. And before I go, remember, as I always say, make sure you put some colour in your life. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye.
Mm-hmm.